Immigration has become Britain's favourite blame game. Every problem, from housing costs to hospital waiting times, gets pinned on the people arriving at our borders. But here's what nobody's talking about. Right now, 1 in 5 NHS staff are foreign nationals. Without them, the health service would collapse overnight. Britain faces an impossible choice. Keep immigration high and deal with the pressures, or cut it and watch essential services fail. Net migration to Britain fell to 431,000 in the year ending December 2024. That sounds like a lot, and it is, but it's actually down from the peaks we saw in 2022 and 2023. Nearly 1 million people arrived last year, 948,000 to be exact. The government tried to get control in 2024. They banned most international students from bringing family members, causing dependent numbers to drop 80% year on year. They raised the salary threshold for skilled workers from £26,200 to £38,700, then pushed it even higher. The family route got tougher too. Want to bring your spouse to Britain? Well, you now need to earn £29,000 minimum, up from £18,600 previously. Small boats grab headlines but represent a fraction of arrivals. About 37,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats in 2024, less than 4% of total immigration. Afghans made up the largest national group. The government scrapped the Rwanda scheme after spending millions and created a new border security command with enhanced powers to tackle smuggling networks. Immigration's economic impact contradicts most assumptions. The Office for Budget Responsibility ran detailed scenarios showing that higher net migration actually improves government finances. Most migrants are working age with high employment rates. Migrant men's employment rate sits at 83% compared to 78% of UK-born men. The OBR found that in scenarios with sustained work route migration, GDP per head rises by about 0.8% above baseline. Total GDP grows even more substantially, and when you add visa fees averaging £1,900 per person, the immigration health surcharge of £2,600 a person, and employer skills charging of £800, the Treasury gains significant revenue before migrants even start paying regular taxes. The Bank of England identified small negative wage effects in semi- and unskilled services, but these concentrate on specific sectors rather than spreading economy-wide. Research consistency shows the workers most affected by new immigration aren't British-born but earlier migrants working in similar industries. British firms, particularly in tech and financial services, report that international recruitment brings crucial skills. BAE Systems and Rolls-Royce, two of Britain's largest defence contractors, actively recruit engineers globally because domestic training can't meet demand. The Entrepreneurs Network found immigrants are disproportionately represented among founders of Britain's fast-growing companies, creating jobs rather than taking them. Productivity, not immigration, explains most wage stagnation. ONS data shows productivity growth has been weak since 2019, with GDP per head underperforming despite total GDP growth. This reflects domestic economic challenges, not immigration impacts. Private sector dependence on immigration often goes unnoticed. The Work Foundation identified 6.8 million people in severely insecure work, but many industries rely on migrant workers to fill even those precarious positions. The construction industry faces particular challenges. With major infrastructure projects planned and housing targets to meet, the sector needs skilled workers Britain isn't training fast enough. The Construction Industry Training Board reports persistent skill gaps that domestic recruitment can't fill. Adult social care reveals the starkest private sector reality. Most care homes are privately run, and international recruitment helps reduce vacancy rates from crisis levels. When visa restrictions tightened in 2024, the sector immediately warned of closures. Tech companies concentrate in London and the southeast partly because they can recruit internationally through these cities' airports and existing international communities. When firms can't get the visa allocations they need, they often move operations to Dublin, Amsterdam, or Berlin instead, taking the jobs and tax revenue with them. Agriculture and food processing tell similar stories. British workers largely won't do seasonal farm work or night shifts in meat processing plants. When the seasonal agricultural workers' scheme numbers prove insufficient, food rots in fields. The National Farmers Union regularly warns about labour shortages threatening food security. The numbers are unambiguous. About 20% of NHS England staff are non-UK nationals. For doctors, it's 36%, for nurses, 30%. The General Medical Council reports that international medical graduates now account for most of the growth in doctors' numbers. The Nursing and Midwifery Council shows 854,000 professionals on their register in 2025, with international recruitment crucial to maintaining numbers. The NHS long-term workforce plan aims to increase domestic training, but medical school takes 5 years minimum, specialist training another 5 to 8 years. Even with expanded places, the transition will take at least 15 years. Meanwhile, existing staff retire and demand grows with an aging population. Social care depends even more on foreign workers. The sector competed for the same pool of workers as the NHS, but with lower wages and worse conditions. When health and care worker visa rules tightened, international recruitment nearly stopped. Skills for Care data shows this immediately worsened vacancy rates that were already at crisis levels. Local NHS trusts report that without international recruitment, they'd have to close wards. Some rural hospitals already operate reduced services because they can't attract staff. The Royal College of Nursing and British Medical Association both state that without immigration, safe staffing levels become impossible. Britain needs approximately 370,000 new homes annually, according to multiple analysis. Planning approvals in 2024 hit just 243,000, the lowest since 2014. This fundamental undersupply predates recent immigration surges and would persist even if immigration stopped tomorrow. The Migration Observatory's comprehensive review found immigration has modest effects on house prices nationally compared to supply constraints. Local impacts vary. Areas with concentrated immigration see more pressure, but the primary driver remains insufficient construction rather than excessive demand. Different immigration groups affect housing differently. International students typically rent for 3 to 4 years, then leave. Skilled workers on 5-year routes to settlement often buy homes, contributing to the economy. Work visa holders in construction and engineering sometimes help build the homes Britain needs. Asylum seekers get placed in government-procured accommodation, not competing in the regular housing market. Land banking, where developers hold land without building, restricts supply more than immigration increases demand. The planning system, largely unchanged since 1947, processes applications at a pace unsuited to modern needs. Council resistance to development, often in areas with the most vocal anti-immigration sentiment, blocks more homes than migration creates demand for. Comprehensive studies found no causal relationship between overall immigration and crime rates in Britain. Research on EU migration actually found crime rates fell in areas with higher immigration. Some studies from the late 1990s identified small property crime increases linked to asylum seekers, but these effects were limited and haven't been replicated in recent data. Home Office statistics don't support claims of disproportionate criminality among immigrants. Small boat arrivals undergo security checks, with those failing removed when possible. The government's focus on disrupting smuggling networks targets the criminals profiting from desperation, not the refugees themselves. Public perception diverges from evidence. Ipsos polling found 31% believed the area houses more asylum seekers than its fair share, rising to 61% among Reform UK voters. This perception gap drives political responses that may not address the actual problems. Official estimates show Brexit reduced trade intensity by 15%, raising import costs just as global inflation spikes. Britain imports nearly half its food, so trade barriers directly hit household budgets. The OBR's analysis shows this trade impact significantly affects economic growth and living standards. Post-Brexit immigration patterns shifted rather than reduced. EU nationals who previously came automatically now need sponsorship. Industries dependent on European workers from hospitality to logistics faced immediate shortages. The government opened new visa routes for non-EU workers, replacing replacing Polish warehouse workers with Indians, Romanian farm workers with Indonesians. Ukraine's schemes brought hundreds of thousands fleeing war. These humanitarian routes, whilst necessary and admirable, added to numbers just as politicians promised reductions. Brexit increased immigration bureaucracy without reduced numbers. Businesses report the sponsorship system costs thousands per worker in fees and administration. Smaller firms often can't afford compliance costs, losing access to international talent their EU competitors still enjoy. International students contributed £41.9 billion to Britain's economy from just the 2021-22 cohort alone. This isn't just fees, but total economic impact, accommodation, spending, and visitors. Universities rely on international fees, typically 3 times domestic rates, to subsidize research and British students. The January 2024 ban on most student dependents caused applications from Nigeria and India to plummet. Universities immediately warned of department closures and redundancies. Some institutions face genuine bankruptcy risk without international student revenue. The graduate route allows students to stay 2 years post-graduation to find skilled work. The Migration Advisory Committee reviewed it in May 2024 and found minimal abuse, recommending its continuation. Most graduates either find appropriate employment or leave when the visa expires. Regional economies depend on student spending. Universities in cities like Sheffield, Nottingham, and Newcastle support thousands of local jobs. When international student numbers fall, local businesses from restaurants to retailers feel the impact immediately through reduced revenue and job losses. British social attitudes data shows 67% think immigration levels are too high. But responses vary dramatically by immigration type. Most support NHS recruitment and seasonal agricultural workers. They oppose low-skilled migration and asylum seekers. They want contributing immigrants, but worry about resource competition. Polarization increased markedly since 2014. Most people now strongly believe immigration enriches Britain culturally, but also more strongly believe it undermines British values. The middle ground has shrunk as opinions move to extremes. YouGov polling reveals misperceptions. The public overestimates asylum seekers as a percentage of immigrants and underestimates students and skilled workers. They think immigrants claim more benefits and contribute less tax than data shows. These gaps between perception and reality shape political discourse and policy demands. The Migration Advisory Committee provides evidence-based recommendations that often contradict political rhetoric. Their reports consistently show immigration's effects are neither uniformly positive nor negative, but depend on specific design and implementation. Successful immigration requires matching arrivals to capacity. Areas needing workers and having infrastructure cope well. Places facing sudden influxes without preparation struggle. This seems obvious, but rarely drives policy, which gets made nationally while impacts occur locally. Investment in integration pays dividends. English language provision, qualification recognition, and employer support help immigrants become productive quickly. The faster integration happens, the sooner benefits appear and tensions reduce, but this requires upfront spending governments resist. Enforcement against illegal working and exploitation matters more than absolute numbers. When employees undercut wages using vulnerable migrants, both British workers and legal migrants suffer. The Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill aims to strengthen these powers, but implementation will determine effectiveness. Immigration isn't Britain's scapegoat or solution, it's both simultaneously. It keeps the NHS functioning whilst adding pressure to local services. It fills essential private sector jobs while creating competition for resources. It generates billions in tax revenue whilst requiring infrastructure investment. Britain faces clear choices: maintaining high immigration and invest properly in housing, services and integration, cut immigration and accept collapsing health services, universities and businesses, or continue the current approach: high immigration with low investment, maximum strain for minimum benefit. The evidence from the OBR, Migration Advisory Committee, and academic research points clearly to managed immigration with proper investment as economically optimal. But political reality makes muddling through most likely, satisfying nobody whilst solving nothing. Until policy catches up with evidence, both British-born and immigrant workers remain trapped in a dysfunctional system. The numbers tell the real story. Britain depends on immigration for economic survival whilst blaming immigrants for problems they didn't create. The data shows immigration slightly raises the GDP per head, significantly improves public finances, and has minimal wage impacts for most workers. The evidence is clear, but politics ignores it. Either Britain gets serious about making immigration work through proper planning and investment, or it faces decline as services collapse and businesses relocate. There's no middle path that works.